Hello, everyone. I wanted to comment on some of your discussion boards. First of all, I thought that the discussion boards were very good and there were some excellent questions. And I've noticed there are a few themes running through your discussion boards, and I'd like to comment on them. So the first one was the relationship of the self to the brain and consciousness. So, and more specifically, following Feinberg comments, which is a right comment, that there isn't a place in the brain where all of your perceptual and sensual experiences come together so that you have a unified experience of what you're looking out into the world, let's say this cup, or when you're thinking, when you're looking inwardly and you're reflecting on yourself or on your stream of consciousness. So this wonderful task or performance that your brain engages in, that is a perceptual experience that is unified of an object, or let's say of my face right now as you are looking at it, is a bit of a mystery, because we don't know exactly how the brain does it. We know that there isn't one part in the brain, let's say, I don't know, the brain stem or the thalamus or whatever it may be, or the corpus callosum that integrates the neural connections between both hemispheres, the left and the right. There isn't a part in the brain where all of the sensual experiences or perceptual experiences that you go through come together. And I guess some people in the past have thought that there is a place in the brain where it all comes together, and when it does come together, then it gives rise to a unified state of consciousness or a unified perceptual experience of one cup. And what I mean here, or but what neuroscientists mean here, is that the perception of the cup is not disjointed from the colors on the cup, and also not disjointed from the sound that the cup emits when I wrap it with my finger. Okay, so the auditory experience, the visual experience of the object, the shape and its color, are all held together. They're not fragmented or smeared out. And that is what is called objectual or perceptual unity in cognitive sciences or psychological sciences. So the brain somehow very quickly, as information passes through your brain, first your apparatus, your perceptual apparatus, and then into your brain, very quickly the brain puts together the picture for you, and it's the picture, the perception of a cup is presented to you, or the perception of a human face is presented to you, and you don't really have to do anything. It's not that you have to willfully put the different pieces, perceptual pieces together so that you can recognize a human face, or that you can recognize an object for what it is. In this case, in this case, a cup. Okay, so this is done unconsciously by the brain, but then the result pops into your consciousness, so you can actually enjoy and use this information for various cognitive tasks, such as decision making, speaking, memorizing, and so on. Okay, so that is one mystery among many of the relationship between the mind and the brain. Now, the other unity is more general or more inclusive. So, for example, everything in my visual field is unified. Okay, so when you are, again, looking at this video, right, you're looking at my face, and my face, the features of my face are unified so that, again, the eyes are not to the left or to the right, and the nose is not somewhere here, or the lips are not flying off somewhere. okay? The perceptual field is unified. And everything in the background is also unified. And my hands are also unified within the overall perceptual field of consciousness. You could call it that way. So nothing is really fragmented, and it's not really fragmented in time either, okay? You can follow my speech, you can register specific words, you can remember what I'm saying, just like you can remember a tune or a song. It makes sense to you once as it is playing in time. So we have, you could say, you know, spatial unity. If you were to freeze a frame and then look at a frame like a picture, our consciousness, especially when it comes to our perceptions or sensual experiences, is unified in space in that manner. And it's also unified in time. But the unity of time is dependent on our attention. So the phenomenon of attention, and I hopefully you will go through this in your psychology classes, but the phenomenon of attention is a mechanism that plays in or performs specific function within your consciousness. And the moment when you tune out, the moment when you don't pay attention, is when you basically lose cognitive or perceptual content, okay? The overall background of consciousness does not cease. It's not that you lose consciousness altogether, okay? You are still conscious, so the most general overall background is still unified, but you kind of tune in and tune out of the narrative of specific elements that you pay attention to. Okay, again, it could be a song, it could be when you're driving a car, you're talking to someone, and then you don't always pay attention to everything that unfolds in front of you while you're driving. Okay, you kind of tune in and tune out, and that is dependent on excuse me, on attention. And that's why it makes sense when, you know, people say, hey, pay attention, you know, you are I'm losing you, or you're no longer interested, or you're thinking about something else, right? Because something has just popped in or popped out of your consciousness, or you have lost the ability to pay attention to one stream of information. So as you can see, apart from the phenomenon or the mechanism of attention, everything in our visual, everything in our consciousness is unified, starting with small objects, and then you can grow bigger, and then the most general and the biggest the biggest sense of unity, or the largest sense of unity, is basically the unity of consciousness from the moment you wake up until you go to sleep. All right, so now all of these different unities are in a way held together, okay? So there's something, the brain has evolved biologically over millions and millions of years to preserve this unity. And it, you know, biologists think that it has evolved in that fashion in order to represent itself and the environment accurately so that it can survive. Because when an organism's perceptual representations are disjointed, then that cannot be conducive to survival, because the organism would not be able to basically look for food or run away from predators or hide from predators, okay? So such features, cognitive features, are very important for survival. All right, now how does this relate to the self? Okay, so everything that we experience that's related to self, let's say personality traits, the subjective, you know, experience of drinking tea, right? All of this happens in my consciousness, and a lot of the features that take place in my consciousness, I identify with, okay? So everything that I can feel right? Tea feels like something, looking at a sunset feels like something. It has an experiential element. You can describe it to me, or you can describe it to someone else. So everything that we experience in consciousness has a subjective layer. Okay, and subjectivity, you could say, is the most rudimentary element of the self. And on top of that, you can build other elements. Okay, so this speaks to the multifaceted or multifunctional elements of consciousness and self. So first, you could from the bottom, you could start with subjectivity. So everything that you experience in your consciousness has a subjective element, or experiential element, or phenomenological element. These words you can use interchangeably. They basically mean the same thing. And then on top of this, on top of subjectivity, you can add personality traits, habits, patterns of behavior, and so on and so forth. And then on top of that, you can add your memories, plans and desires for the future. And when you put all of that in a bag, then you can call this bag the self. But the self, again, this bag, when you unpack this bag, you will find all these wonderful psychological and cognitive tricks inside. So that's why the definition of self is is difficult, because we're not talking about one thing. We're talking about many different things that are happening almost at the same time, okay, and somehow are held together by consciousness. So that is the difficulty in explaining or clearly defining the self. All right, so I think that addresses the relationship of the brain to consciousness and self, and different features of self. The other one was whether the self changes. Yes, the self changes just like the brain changes. Okay, the brain goes through specific wiring patterns and rewiring patterns. We also know that there is now well-studied phenomenon called neuroplasticity, and I think in your either currently or in your future psychology classes, you will get a chance to learn about neuroplasticity. So basically, in the 50s and 60s, the mantra was that the mantra of the day was that when you are born, you have a specific number of genes, and those genes constitute or determine who you're going to be throughout your life, in a kind of deterministic manner. But today we know that's not true. We have had 60 or 70 years of research, and we know that different experiences, life experiences, top down change the brain. Basically, everything that you do top down changes the brain. So the air that you breathe, the people that you socialize with, the water that you drink, the food that you eat, whether you do sports or not, whether you exercise on a regular basis or not, with whom you have sex, etc., etc. All of this has a causal effect on what the brain does and how the brain is wired. So specific activities, specific environmental conditions will turn on and off specific genes in your cells. And of course, by turning on and turning off specific genes, you change your body and your brain. So the self changes because the body changes. But before I move on, when I look at myself, even when most of you are younger than I am, but when you look at yourself and you compare yourself when you were 5 or 6 or 10, maybe even 2 years ago, to your current self, you can see that there are changes. There might be changes in your value system. There might be changes in patterns of behavior, specific habits. So you can see that you can track changes. You won't be able to track all of them because you're not fully conscious of all of them. You don't really pay attention to all of them, but you can definitely list the way you have changed, and this will continue. You can also expect that specific personality traits that you are known for now will crystallize in the future. So they will solidify, they will become stronger in the future. But again, nothing is written in stone. Some features are more or less the same, but a lot of the content, a lot of the memories, a lot of your desires, a lot of your goals, a lot of your values will change. And I think that's a good thing. That's actually quite interesting, although you may be sentimental about your previous self. But the exciting news is that there are new features that will be added or deleted from yourself, or the matrix of the self that you enjoy right now. It is also true that the environment heavily affects the self, or what you think. Again, your habits, your goals, your behaviors. Your family is quite important, but also your friends are quite important, and the culture of the society that you live in. So living in Canada more or less produces or creates specific human beings, and if you were to immigrate or move to a different country and stay in that culture for a few years, it would rub off on you. It would definitely affect you and change you. So if you were to come back to Canada, people would notice specific differences. So when I go to Poland, I haven't been in a few years, but when I go to Poland to visit, yeah, I have, it's a bit funny because when I live in Canada, I have a Polish accent. And when I go to Poland, the first week or so, people tell me that I have a bit of a Canadian accent in my Polish. And it takes about a week or two for me to adjust again. So, things like this happened on a regular basis. So the self changes, not only, you could say, internally based on changing your behaviors and your values and your goals and desires for the future, because they shape the narrative of your future. But also the immediate external environment changes us physically and mentally. So one student was commenting on one of the videos that you watched, and he made reference to this idea of double mirrors. So we project ourselves onto society, but society projects onto ourselves, and there is an interplay between both forces: the force of the individual vis-a-vis society, and the society vis-a-vis the individual, and they mold each other in a dynamic, you could say, recursive dynamic manner. Okay. Okay, why do people believe in afterlife and the notion of soul? That was an interesting one. And then metaphysical question, materialism. How does materialism relate to the self? Yes, most of the people on earth believe in an afterlife. Most people are religious. I was brought up in a Catholic household, although my parents were not really that religious, but I did go to church on a regular basis. But once I started growing up intellectually, I changed my views about religion. I still think religion is important, but I don't think, but I have a much critical and a lot more mature view of what religion means and what it should mean in my life than when I was 12 or 15. So I think people believe in an afterlife. There are a few reasons. There's lots of literature out there, but from a psychological perspective, I think it's difficult for people to let go of life. It's difficult for people to let go of subjectivity. Okay, people enjoy for the most part, people enjoy life. People enjoy eating. People enjoy going to the movies. People enjoy kissing, going on dates. People enjoy driving cars. You name it. We do many different things that give us pleasure. Okay, so we are very much attached to life and our sensual experiences. We have goals, desires. We have plans. We have families. We have children, and yeah, that's a lot. That's we grow emotionally attached to all of that, and when you take that away, or the thought of having that taken away can be crushing. So I think the afterlife is a cultural construct, but also a psychological construct to get us to allow us to think into the future. Okay, to extend life beyond death. It's a good story. It's a story of coping with the realization that our lives will end. And I don't know how to think about it personally today. I'm a bit, I guess it's too early, although I do think about mortality and I do think about death. But I think it's still a little bit too early for me to get quite philosophical about and real or existential about death or impending death, because that's still a long way for me and very long way for you. But from a philosophical perspective, one should definitely ponder death, because it's a real thing. It's as real as eating, or going to the washroom, or going for a walk. Okay? It's very much part of our life. So I think it's an afterlife, and the notion of soul is this belief in something that is beyond the material here and now, and that carries promise and reward for whatever work we have put in here, so that we don't lose it, so that we don't feel that it has been done for nothing. So I don't think that's the whole answer, but I think that's part of it. And I think it's mostly psychological and cultural. I don't think it has much to do with objective truth, but we should be skeptical about that too, because that hasn't been proven true or false. That is the existence of afterlife or a soul. But I'm skeptical. All right, materialism and the self. So a couple of you commented on Epicurus, and according to Epicurus, this is ancient Greece, and this is not only ancient Greece, but in India and in China. India and China have also very long philosophical histories, very rich philosophical histories. And in Buddhism, there's also a notion of materialism, and that God doesn't exist, soul doesn't exist. These are only constructs that really get us into trouble, get us thinking about things that don't exist, and we become attached to things that don't exist. And when we grow attached, we of course suffer. So Epicurus says that nothing exists beyond atoms, the atomic level of reality. Now, this is more than 2,000 years ago. It was pretty advanced for his day. But today we know that reality doesn't end at the atomic level. We know that we don't actually know where reality bottoms out. We know that we have identified quite a few subatomic particles, and we have been playing around with them. We know that the universe is composed of subatomic particles. We also know that the cosmos is composed of black matter, about which we have no clue. But we're searching, we're looking for answers, and here on Earth we have physics, and we have different subdisciplines in physics, subatomic physics, quantum mechanics, and so on. Very interesting stuff, but we don't know where it all bottoms out. We don't know how deep the rabbit hole can take us, if you want to use that metaphor. So with Epicurus, we have atoms, and according to Epicurus, everything is composed of atomic properties. So you, myself, and everything around us is composed of atomic properties, and so is consciousness, and so is the self. Now, if that's the case, then everything reduces to material properties, okay? That means everything that is psychological in your head, in your mind, or commonly in your head, also reduces or can be explained from a biological or physical or chemical perspective. We don't have that theory yet, because that would be quite a revolutionary theory. We don't have that knowledge yet. But sooner or later, we will get there. So if you're a materialist, then you hold that everything in this universe is composed of some type of physical properties and different arrangement of those physical properties, whether it's a brick of gold, whether it's human skin, whether it's water, a cloud, or consciousness. Okay, it all can be explained in physical and maybe mechanistic language. If you're a dualist, that means you say that there are physical substances in the universe, okay, and different combinations of those substances. That is, combinations of physical properties make up then different entities. And then there are also substances that are non-physical. Here you could count the soul or the self. Okay, for René Descartes, a mathematician writing in the 16th century, who's well known for his thesis, I think, therefore I am. Descartes was a dualist, a substance dualist. That means he believed that the world is composed of two substances, physical substances that are extended in space. You can weigh them, you can describe them in physical language or scientific language, and there's also consciousness, the self or the soul, that cannot be described with the language of physics or generally the language of science. So somehow they're intertwined, and he thought that consciousness or the self is intertwined with the body in the pineal gland. Somewhere in the brain, in the pineal gland, the two substances come together, and that's why we function as a unitary creature with bodily states and psychological states. But of course, he was wrong about the pineal gland. Today we know that the pineal gland performs a key role in the endocrine system, but it is definitely not the place where the mind or the soul connects with the body. But it was a good effort. But the effort is still with us. The importance of his effort is still with us, because notice that from a psychological perspective, from the perspective of what it is like to be you, from the inside, how you experience things, you don't experience the brain working, you experience the effects of how the brain works, right? When you have a memory popping into your consciousness, you don't know exactly what's happening in your brain. You don't know exactly where that is happening, and you don't know exactly which structures and which neurons and which neurotransmitters are taking place, working somehow to give rise to a state of memory. All you have access to is the result of that work. It's it's packaged and given to you, you could say, by your brain and placed in your consciousness so you can enjoy it, or you can use it for other cognitive tasks. So from the first person perspective, or from the subjective perspective, or from the experiential perspective, it feels that we live in two different realms. We live in the realm of physical entities and physical mechanisms, and also in the realm of subjective experiences that don't feel physical at all. So the language of dualism is still with us. That's why people still talk about souls and spirits and the mind as something immaterial. But I think it is a mistake to say that, because just because we don't experience the physical entities or mechanisms in our brains that produce conscious states, that doesn't mean that they are not subserved or underpinned or constructed by physical brain features or mechanisms. So here is a reality. Here's a problem of appearance versus reality. It appears to us that our brain, our conscious states or states of self that we enjoy are non-material because they don't feel material in the way this cup feels material. A memory doesn't feel like that. A desire doesn't feel like that. Being in love doesn't feel like that. Although, interestingly, being in love or maybe being in a state of hate or excruciating mental pain has very, very, very vivid physical correlates. So something might be happening in your stomach, or something might be happening to your skin, or you might have a headache. So you can see that there's a very close relationship, but still our minds feel non-physical. And then we take this experience and we think that it corresponds to something real, but that hasn't been shown and hasn't been shown to be true. Therefore, we should be skeptical. Most likely it is the case that we just need to figure out how conscious, unified conscious states that feel non-physical are supported or constructed by a physical entity or multiple physical entities like the brain. Okay, so that's materialism and dualism. Or do we have one self or multiple selves? Excuse me. I'm an allergy sufferer, so yeah, so that's why I'm touching my nose. Anyway, yes, that is a good question. Certainly specific pathologies like dissociative pathologies, where one experience of self goes away or is not present, is substituted by a different experience of self or different experience of external elements altogether. In some dissociative fugues, you know, patients will go into a store and they don't know why they have come to the store. They don't know exactly what is the relationship between what has happened an hour before and them entering into a store. This could happen. This could take place for, you know, minutes, hours, but it could also go on for days and weeks and months. So this is an example of dissociating or fragmenting away from one's typical stream of consciousness or a stream of consciousness or reality that he or she is accustomed to or used to. So from this perspective, one could go through different iterations of experiences or consciousness or different selves, and they don't necessarily have a unitary relation with each other. Multiple personality disorder, another example, when a subject, a patient, ceases to be one person and then they start being another person. The problem is that there's no interrelationship between the 3 or 4 or 5 different personalities. If there was, then we could talk about a unifying personality that holds all of them together. And that would resemble somewhat of a normal state, because throughout our day, we go up and down emotionally. We go up and down in terms of the activities that we engage in. So, you know, there isn't really a lot of the things that we experience in our consciousness is changeable. It's movable. Okay, it's quite dynamic. But there are specific features that we can definitely point to that are the same and that somehow maintains our identity over time. And that's memory, that's one way of tracking it. And also the unity of consciousness throughout the day, that's another way of tracking it, and whatever happens within that overall state of consciousness in terms of different content, that's also a way of tracking the self and identity. But we do change, and it's also important to remember that human beings are very good liars, and we are very good actors. Okay, acting is a profession where you lie for a living, and some people are really good at it. We think that acting is good when we are duped, we are fooled into thinking that the actors are actually going through real experiences, so real that they translate into real emotions on the screen, and as the audience watches, they relate to the experiences, or they relate to the actors or actresses, and we call that good acting. But it is all a lie, basically. So because we are such good actors and liars, you could say that we go into different states of ourselves. We can engage, we can experience ourselves from different perspectives. So if I were a good actor, I could, let's say, put on a different personality, a different self from the one that I am right now. And people do this on a regular basis, right? We don't have to use acting as an example. I think acting is a very good example, but we can talk about the way people pretend, the way they put on different faces or masks when they go to work, when they meet their friends. With some people we are quite genuine, we are really ourselves, and with some people and social backgrounds or social groups, we are not quite ourselves. We pretend, we conform to specific rules, or we conform to specific obligations, customs. So when you invite someone over to your place, are you truly yourself, or do you act a little bit differently? And I'm sure everyone acts a little bit differently when they have guests over. And that depends also whether it's close friends or whether it's family members, your uncle, your aunt, or your mother, or your father. So we do change, and we can engage in different, we have this toolkit. We could call this personality toolkit, and we can engage different personality traits depending on the tasks that we are performing and depending on the demands of the environment. So the self is multifaceted in that fashion, and in some psychopathological cases, it can basically be fragmented into different selves altogether. Okay, I'm just trying to, I think that's pretty, oh, Plato. So Plato's, there was a question, because Plato believed in a soul and the theory of forms. Yes, this is, again, ancient Greece, the bedrock of modern and then postmodern, but not postmodernity per se, because that's a different theory altogether, one that we will not be entertaining here. There's no point. But Plato and Buddha and Socrates and Lao Tzu and other figures are really the fathers of philosophical thinking. So Plato's theory of recollection is basically a theory of soul. So Plato thought that when we learn things, specifically when a person who is untrained, let's say in mathematics or geometry, or other analytical thinking can all of a sudden be taught. He thought that he or she can be taught because his or her soul has that knowledge, but it has to be relearned. So that's basically his theory of soul. We all have souls, but we have to relearn what is in our souls. It is not evidently true to us, but the knowledge is in us. We just need to recollect it. We need to dig it up, basically, and relearn it. Okay, and when the body dies, the soul moves on. Now, this idea was picked up by Christianity pretty quickly. Well, not very quickly, but quickly from the perspective of a longer time span. And I think this notion of the soul migrating and surviving the death of the body has played a pivotal and an important role in many religious, many religious traditions. So that's basically the connection between Plato and Christianity, or other religious traditions, and the notion of soul. Now, the theory of forms here, Plato also thought that, let's say, geometrical truths such as the internal angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees is a mathematical truth that exists somewhere in the universe. Okay, this knowledge of geometry or mathematics or logic, whatever it may be, or art, although art carries a lesser value than mathematics or philosophy for Plato because it's representational, is somewhere in the universe, and it needs to be captured by the mind. So you don't become wise with knowledge through the body. You become wise through the mind, by philosophizing, by thinking, by training the mind. And the knowledge, basically, all this knowledge is out there in the universe. You just have to tap into this library of knowledge with your mind, and you can pretty much learn anything. So that is the theory of forms. So there's a form for everything. There's a form for geometry. There's a form for morality. There's a form for justice. There's a form for mathematics. There's a form for logic and language, and so on and so forth. Okay. There's even a form for a chair. So I'm not saying, I'm just describing it. I'm not saying that this is a metaphysics you should buy into, but many have been supporters and critics. But that's just one way, another way of looking at the theory of forms, which is basically the theory of knowledge, how we acquire knowledge, and what is the relationship of the soul to the knowledge that we discover and then carry with us. Okay, I think that's it. So again, thank you very much for your postings. They're very good, with really good questions. And again, I look forward to the postings for this week. And I think I will also create a short commentary on your postings this week. So I think it's that will be all for today. And if you have any questions, email me, or if you want to use Flipgrid, record a short video, that's fine. And if you want to use the office hours, please do so as well. But I think I will restrict the office hours either to Tuesday or Thursday. And if you could let me know which day works better for you, that would be good as well. Well, anyway, I hope this is informative and answers some of your questions. And I'll see you and talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye.